All right, so let's go through today's news. Today was a very bizarre day, so let's go through the biggest news. So it all started out. I've got my
Every
notes
day's
here.
been a bizarre day. What are you talking about?
Now, this is the others are like surprising, unusual. This one's genuinely bizarre. So we get initial reports that from Iranian media, that Shabahar, Bandar Abbas, Kanarak, Ahvaz, Bushir were all targeted. There's explosions there. Kashim, Sirik, Jask, all these were being targeted. And everyone just immediately came to the conclusion, including people in Iran, that this is the new wave of airstrikes by the US. And then it all starts becoming bizarre when Axios reports that the White House or whoever they spoke with, the US official, says that the US is not striking Iran. So that was a bit bizarre. We saw no indications on all the radars of any American jets or aircraft that are active. Okay, it was in the US, and immediately everyone came to the conclusion that Israel has joined the fight. Because we were talking earlier today, we didn't talk about it yesterday because I think the news came in today that Israel requested a green light from the US or asked the US whether the US would like Israel to join. So immediately everyone assumed it was Israel. But then Israeli media say it was not Israel. The Iranians don't point to Israel either. And there were usually when it's Israel attacking, you'll see their fighter jets in the air on the radars, or you'll see their cruise missiles, just like that attack right before the MOU was signed, days beforehand,
Sure.
when Israel attacked without American involvement. And then Israeli media said it's Gulf countries, hinting at Bahrain, Kuwait, and I think naming Bahrain, one of the outlets named Bahrain and Kuwait. And one would come to the conclusion that maybe Bahrain and Kuwait are doing what the UAE and Saudi did, which is retaliate against Iranian strikes as a way to deter future strikes. So Iran, whenever they want to retaliate against the US, they might attack US warships, but not US bases in those countries. So that was the new assumption. So while these reports were coming in, Iranian media started reversing or denying the reports of explosions, saying they were untrue. So they said the initial reports of explosions are not true. They did not happen. So that seemed like a cover-up. For me, I concluded this made it seem more likely to be the Gulf countries, the Bahrain, Kuwait, but Iran not reporting about them because they don't want to escalate things from Bahrain and Kuwait. They got the message. Doesn't mean they want to attack Bahrain and Kuwait, but they're like, we don't want to, have things escalate between us and our Gulf neighbors. So that's why they've asked the media to kind of reverse those claims. And then afterwards, the Iranian media reaffirmed the claims that no, there were attacks, and it said the following. So it seems they came up with a narrative, or a report was approved, or whatever happened. One outlet said a military headquarters on the outskirts of Bushir was hit by a projectile from, quote, American Zionist enemy, according to IRNA, citing the deputy political security governor of Bushir. The deputy says the attack resulted in no casualties. That was in the early days, but then afterwards, so then they were denied. Then afterwards, Tasnim said Iranian Navy site at Konarak. So this is the report where they confirmed it. The one I read earlier was before they denied them afterwards. Tasnim said that the Iranian Navy site in Konarak was subjected to airstrikes, but they don't know who. And then the Konarak governor says Iran's Navy military area was targeted by enemy fighter jets in 2 stages this evening. Responsible agencies' rescue efforts, blah, 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 are underway. It's unclear who attacked. And there's one more report, I didn't save it, by another Iranian media saying a projectile struck one of the locations. So in terms of who it was, depends who you want to trust. Israeli broadcast Khan, for example, is blaming the Arab countries, but then you want to take that with a grain of salt, because obviously Israel would like to see the Gulf and Iran fight. So it's always take that with a grain of salt. Naya, which I think is Iranian, saying that they were launched from Kuwait. The missiles were launched from Kuwait. Axios says it was in the US. So we've got all these. Naya also said there was activity by Saudi drones off the coast, but these are drones, doesn't mean there were strikes. So this is why I said it's confusing. You've got all these different conflicting reports. I haven't spoken to anyone to get any information. I've just been doing interviews, so I don't really have anything to share. So I can only speculate, and based on what we've seen in this war, my guess, I really don't know. I would guess Bahrain and Kuwait. Obviously, there's always the possibility that there were no strikes, but it definitely looks like there were strikes. All the locations and the reports.
The U.S. is blinking and backing down. So there is a report, on Naya, the French outlet, that may be tied to Iranian sources, but according to a U.S. official, the failure of the U.S. military to launch new strikes against Iran on Thursday was the result of regional efforts to de-escalate the situation. That explains Trump's comment last night that, Iran is begging to start negotiations again. Iran is not begging. It is the United States. I've checked with a variety of sources which know what the U.S. military is doing. One of my friends sent me word that he was in contact with one of his active duty buddies who's deployed right now in the region, was involved with what's called a deconfliction cell. So the deconfliction cell, its job is to make sure that U.S. aircraft don't get tied up with Israeli aircraft, or that there's no friendly fire, that you don't have friendly forces shooting at each other, that neutral states aren't attacked, etc. He's being redeployed home. Okay? Now, if the United States was going to conduct major combat operations, you would want that deconfliction cell still in place. So that's being deactivated. They're coming home. And there is still no evidence that the CATs, the crisis action teams, which were set up a week before the war started on the 28th, that those have been reactivated. So the United States, despite all this chest, beating and tough talk, and we're bombing this and we're bombing that, U.S. is still on a path to withdraw and to disengage. Now, Iran retaliated for that last round of American strikes, and it hit Mawafaq al-Salt, the air base, among others. And I think it caused some significant damage. And, the United States, instead of retaliating, is like, okay, let's quit while we're ahead. They're not really ahead, but that's how they'll portray it.
Yeah, I'm aligned. I don't see this escalating into a full-blown war or a death. I know that Trump said the MOU is dead. I see it as a struggle between the US and Iran on who controls the Strait of Hormuz. And I think Iran, as we've discussed yesterday, they'll retaliate by striking the same locations. They did strike Qatar yesterday, which I'll ask you about now. Limited strike, more of a warning shot. Seems like very limited strike.
Al Udeid Air Force Base.
Yeah, so that's a new one.
Well, no, it's because there were KC-135s that showed up there, and the Iranians said, "Hey, if you're going to allow your airfields to be used by the U.S., we're going to bomb them and hit them with missiles," which they did.
Yeah, or also telling the Gulf countries as well could be a message like, hey, if you don't work with us to make sure the Americans either don't use your base, don't keep attacking us, you're going to be dragged into it as well. So we've got these escalation ladders, and the way I feel it happens every time is the Americas strike Iran, sometimes escalate, as we've seen now, and Iran would escalate until it gets to a level where, as we said yesterday, the Americans would be like, all right, the cost is too high now, and kind of take steps back again. And we're seeing that happen again. But it's just not going to change anything. That's what I've been saying for days. Like, there's nothing's going to change. Now, let me talk about what the Iranians have done. So they've struck, as we said, the Mawafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. They've also struck the Ali Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, and the Bahrain Fifth Fleet headquarters again in Bahrain,
and the Al-Isa airfield in Bahrain as well.
So Sheikh Isa, is it the Sheikh Isa one you mean?
Yeah, Sheikh Isa.
Yeah, so they struck that as well. So Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan. The American attack, according to New York Times, was 14 times larger than the one a couple of weeks ago. So we've seen those back and forth about, 2 weeks ago or so.
Yeah.
June.
Oh, it's so big and massive. All I can tell you is someone who was involved with the targeting and the attacks in the first weeks of the war said this didn't even come close.
to.
Could it be that the United States is lying, exaggerating? Oh, no, that couldn't be. That never happened. That's
And
my
it doesn't come.
sarcasm for today,
No,
to
no,
this point.
doesn't come. It doesn't come close to the 14 times larger. Doesn't come close to the pre-war ferocity of the strikes, the intensity of the wartime strikes.
Yeah, look, right now what's happening, you got to look, it's important to understand that when you carry out military operations, there is an infrastructure behind it. And if you will, the bigger the operation, the bigger the infrastructure. So if we saw that infrastructure getting built up, being expanded, or being basically turned back on to what it was on June 14th, before the MOU was signed, then I'd say, yeah, it looks like the United States is, they're not giving up. That's not what happened, just the opposite. So, and what happened in the Strait of Hormuz today? Any ships attempt to go through the Omani Channel? Nope.
No.
So who's in control? Who's in control of the Strait of Hormuz?
Pretty hard to dispute that. Iran.
You can say, come on, you can say it. Iran.
Iran, yeah, has always been in control.
And can the United States break Iran's control? The answer is no. They can't. Not without, they might be able to do some significant damage if they're really to incur some significant losses. And the losses would not just be on aircraft in that field, but the bases from which they operate will be decimated. They hit 10 ballistic missiles on Muwafa. You're not going to see any damage reports right now coming out, but I guarantee you those strikes inflicted some casualties and probably destroyed some aircraft.